Every Victoria Cross story begins the same way. A moment where everything goes wrong. In August 2013, a patrol in Helmand province was ambushed by Taliban fighters and pinned down under devastating fire. Men were wounded, the fight was slipping away, until one young paratrooper stood up, ran straight across open ground under enemy fire, and changed the entire battle. This is the story of Joshua Leakey, VC. The helicopter blades were thumping overhead as the patrol stepped off into the dust of Helmand province. It was August the 22nd, 2013. A joint force of British paratroopers, US Marines and Afghan soldiers had just been dropped off into a small Afghan village suspected of hiding illegal weapons. For the men on the ground, it was meant to be a routine operation. Move in, search the compounds, then move out. But Helmand had a habit of turning routine patrols into full-blown firefights. Watching from a nearby hill was a small fire support element from the 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment. Among them was a young Lance Corporal named Joshua Leakey. From their elevated position, they had a clear view over the village below. And within minutes of landing, the quiet exploded. Machine gun fire ripped through the air. Rocket-propelled grenades slammed into the patrol's position. Over the radio came the call that instantly tightens every soldier's chest. Troops in contact. The patrol had walked straight into a Taliban ambush. From the hilltop, Leakey and his team could see rounds kicking up dust around the patrol below. Men were pinned down in the open and with enemy fighters firing from well-prepared positions. Then another message came through the radio. An American Marine captain had been hit. From his vantage point, Leakey could see just how serious the situation was becoming. The patrol was under intense fire and losing control of the fight. Something had to happen, and quickly. He immediately took charge of the small fire support team beside him. With 3 other British paratroopers and an Afghan soldier, he began moving down the hill toward the contact, toward the gunfire, toward the ambush. As they closed the distance, the sound of bullets snapping past grew louder. Dust kicked up around their boots and enemy rounds struck the ground nearby. When Leakey reached the wounded Marine officer, the situation was critical. Under constant enemy fire, he dropped beside the Marine and began to administrate first aid, working quickly to stabilize him while the firefight raged around them. But it was clear that treating the casualty alone wouldn't solve the bigger problem. The Taliban fighters still had the upper hand. They were pouring machine gun fire into the patrol's position and dominating the battlefield. If that continued, more men would go down. Leakey knew what had to happen. The machine guns his team had left back at the top of the hill had to be brought forward. Without hesitation, he sprinted back up the exposed slope. Enemy fighters immediately targeted him. Bullets cracked through the air and struck the rocks and dirt around him as he ran. Some rounds even ricocheted off the weapon he was carrying. But Leakey reached the top of the hill. He grabbed the machine gun and dragged it down into a better firing position overlooking the enemy fighters. Then he opened fire. The heavy weapons roared, sending controlled bursts of rounds into the Taliban positions below. Almost instantly, the dynamic of the firefight began to shift. Other soldiers began returning fire more aggressively as the machine guns suppressed the enemy positions. The insurgents were still firing from multiple locations. So once again, under the same relentless enemy fire, he handed his weapon over to another soldier and he ran back up the hill, across open ground, straight into the storm of bullets for a second time. He reached the top, grabbed another machine gun and once again hauled it down the slope into position. Then he began firing again. Now 2 machine guns were hammering the insurgent positions. For the next 45 minutes, the firefight raged across the dusty Afghan hillside. Gunfire echoed through the valley. Radio calls crackled constantly as soldiers coordinated movements. Dust, smoke and adrenaline filled the air as British paratroopers, US Marines and Afghan soldiers fought side by side to break the ambush. Slowly but surely, the momentum began to shift. The Taliban fighters, who had started the fight with the advantage, were now under heavy pressure themselves. Their firing positions began to fall silent one by one. By the end of the battle, 11 insurgents had been killed and several more wounded. Only when air support arrived overhead did fighting finally begin to fade. With the immediate threat gone, Leakey handed the machine gun over to another soldier and immediately returned to the wounded Marine officer. He remained with him, overseeing his treatment and ensuring the casualty was safely evacuated from the battlefield. The fight was over, but the actions of one soldier had changed the outcome entirely. By repeatedly exposing himself to enemy fire, running across open ground and repositioning heavy weapons and leading the counterattack, Lance Corporal Joshua Leakey had turned the tide on the battle. His courage under fire had prevented what could have been a devastating loss of life. 2 years later, in 2015, those actions will be recognised with the highest award for bravery in the British and Commonwealth Armed Forces, the Victoria Cross. Leakey became the only living British soldier to receive the Victoria Cross for actions during the war in Afghanistan. And in an historic moment, he also became the last person to receive the medal from Queen Elizabeth II. But there was another remarkable detail to the story. Joshua Leakey wasn't the first member of his family to earn the Victoria Cross. His distant relative, Nigel Leakey, was also awarded the medal during the Second World War for extraordinary bravery in East Africa. 2 men from the same family, 2 generations, both earning the highest honour for courage under fire. Today, Joshua Leakey continues to serve in the Parachute Regiment as a colour sergeant, a quiet professional who never set out to become a national hero. Because like many soldiers who perform extraordinary acts in combat, Leakey later described his actions simply as doing what needed to be done, helping his mates, stepping forward when the moment demanded it. And on that hot August day in Helmand province, when a patrol was pinned down and under heavy fire, one paratrooper refused to step back. He ran toward the gunfire, not once, but again and again, and in doing so, he changed the course of the battle. Joshua Leakey, paratrooper, Victoria Cross recipient, and a man whose courage under fire became the turning point on a dusty hillside in Afghanistan.